Sara Werneke is the Tax Program Coordinator, Historic Preservation Architect with the Oklahoma State Historic Preservation Office. She holds a Bachelor's of Architecture and a Bachelor's of Arts with a major in Fine Arts with a minor in Global Studies from Drury University in Missouri. She has been with SHPO since April 2018. Her first role with SHPO was as their National Register Program Coordinator. She mentions that she wants you to know that they do not have money. That was one of the things, misconceptions and values and whatnot, but she is going to talk about the different roles and how that they can assist and different ways that they can help, the state can help us to preserve and look after our historical properties and artifacts. So Sarah.
Yes, thank you. So as I said, my name is Sara Werneke. I am the Tax and Historic Preservation Tax Incentives Program Coordinator and Historic Preservation Architect at the Oklahoma State Historic Preservation Office. It's the reason why we in government use acronyms, because that's a long thing. So if you hear the word SHPO, that just means it stands for State Historic Preservation Office. So that's what that means. So this presentation will briefly go over what we do at the SHPO and our efforts to document, share, and preserve, and help preserve our state's historic resources, and then for the purposes of this presentation, specifically our New Deal programs resources. So this is us. This is staff here at the State Historic Preservation Office. The Oklahoma SHPO is a division of the Oklahoma Historical Society that carries out the programs established under the National Historic Preservation Act in partnership with the U.S. Department of the Interior and the National Park Service. With these programs as the tools, the SHPO works with federal, tribal, state, and local governments, the business and development community, preservation professionals, nonprofit organizations, and concerned citizens to protect Oklahoma's significant archaeological and historic resources. So, briefly going over each one of the programs that is facilitated out of our offices, please note that each one of these programs is only ran by one person in the entire state. So I'm the only one of me in the entire state. Michael Mays, who joined us today, is the only one of him in the entire state. So when you're asking about a specific program, just know that there is one person in the entire state of Oklahoma that's that. So the National Register of Historic Places is the catalog of the buildings, sites, structures, districts, and objects significant in our past, and the register is the foundation for all the other SHPO programs. Listing in the National Register provides recognition, limited protection, and in some cases financial incentives for these important properties in the form of making the building eligible for the Historic Preservation Tax Credit and grants offered by various entities such as the National Park Service and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. The SHPO identifies, evaluates, and nominates properties for this special designation. There are currently a little over 1,400 properties in Oklahoma that are listed in the National Register. Section 106, also known as Review and Compliance. The SHPO is responsible for Section 106 review of federally funded, licensed, and permitted projects to ensure compliance with federal preservation legislation. The SHPO staff assesses the significance of properties within project areas, reviews the impact of the projects on significant resources, and consult with agencies to develop ways to avoid or mitigate damage to the resources. Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act stipulates that federal agencies must consider the effect of their undertakings on properties listed in or eligible for the National Register. The SHPO has an important role in this process and consults with the Oklahoma Archaeological Survey under the program. The SHPO assists federal agencies for their respective or their recipients of funding, licensure, or permits to determine if significant archaeological or historic resources are located within the project area, and if so, whether the undertaking will impact those properties. Depending on the situation, SHPO helps the agency to develop appropriate mitigation of any adverse effects to these valuable resources. So, kind of putting this in perspective, the project to repair the archway for the cemetery was, there was a federal grant associated with it, pretty sure, and our office reviewed that project to make sure that it was going to be done in a historically sensitive manner. And then it was done in a historically sensitive manner. So that's, a real world example of what, even down to the little bitty projects, how our office sort of behind the scenes affects these projects. And Section 106 projects can be anything from building rehabilitations, fixing of a fence, or to roadworks, cell towers, anything that needs federal funding, licensing, or permitting, we review. So we review about 3,000 federal undertakings over the course of our fiscal year. So when we say that, we have several projects on our desk, it's usually what that means is that, and for a lot of them, they'll go to each one of our desks that does review. I review projects that will impact a listed or determined eligible property. Michael, because he is the National Register Program Coordinator, will do effect calls. So he may look at, of those 3,000 projects, he actually may look at 10,000 properties over a course of a year to determine whether or not they are historic. And then our Section 106 coordinator, Christina Wyckoff, is also our historic archaeologist. So she does post-contact archaeology. And so she will also look at all those projects just to make sure that the archaeological resources are being considered as well. So just kind of give you perspective of what it is that we actually do. And for a lot of these New Deal projects, because they were started on the municipal level, and they are still owned by municipalities, by government entities, and so they will get a lot of funding that's through the federal government or some other grant catalyst for some of those maintenance projects. And so we will see these more often through 106 process than we will through my program, which is the tax incentives program, which is what we're trying to talk about right now. So the state and federal tax law currently provides attractive incentives for the rehabilitation of historic and older buildings. These special benefits encourage revitalization of historic districts as well as individual buildings. To qualify for the federal tax incentives, requirements of both the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, and the U.S. Department of the Interior through the National Park Service must be met. To qualify for state tax incentives, requirements stipulated in the Oklahoma statute must be met. The State Historic Preservation Office is the initial point of contact for applicants and participants in the review of proposed rehabilitation projects. The Technical Preservation Services branch of the National Park Service represents the agency responsible for certifying historic structures and rehabilitation work. This is a ask for permission program, not an ask for forgiveness program. It is a 3-part review and approval process, but in Oklahoma, once you qualify for the 20% federal tax credit, you automatically qualify for an additional 20% at the state level. So you get about 40% back in tax credits that you take over the next 5 years after your project is complete. To put it in perspective, if you have a $1.5 million project total, And of that, $1 million of that are what's called qualified expenditures. You would get $400,000 back over 5 years to offset your income tax liability. So you'd get about $80,000 a year to offset your income tax. Give you a much bigger number. The recently completed First National Center in Oklahoma City was an over $300 million project, and of that, $260 million roughly was qualified costs. So, about, $130 million in tax credits goes a long way. So, kind of puts it in perspective of how much value this program has for our development community. All right, our Certified Local Governments program with the National Historic Preservation Act provides for partnerships among federal, tribal, state, and local governments to identify, evaluate, and protect the buildings, structures, districts, sites, and objects significant in the nation's history. Under the 1980 amendments to the National Historic Preservation Act, a local government becomes a formal partner when it achieves Certified Local Government Status, or CLG. Under the CLG program, local governments that enforce appropriate historic preservation zoning ordinances are delegated certain SHPO responsibilities, receive federal matching funds for development of their local preservation program, and participate in the National Register of Historic Places nomination process. Like I said, we do have some money, but only for specific pockets of people. And this is the Certified Local Government program is one of those pockets that we have to give money to that are specifically for historic preservation related undertakings within their community. Surveys. The SHPO funds and coordinates surveys to identify historic, architectural, and archaeological resources throughout the state. Information gathered in the survey and nomination process is maintained in the Oklahoma Landmarks Inventory, a continually growing database of information, which is the collection of information the SHPO has compiled on thousands of individual properties throughout the state. Data is collected through various sources, including the SHPO's Comprehensive Survey Program, the federal Section 106 review process, or information submitted by individuals. The level of documentation for each property varies, but it provides a baseline for researchers. The information in the OLI is only as much as we are given in the forms. So the more information that you can give us, the better information we're going to have. Through systematic field investigations and archival research, archaeological and architectural historic resources are identified, recorded, and evaluated for National Register eligibility. The Centennial Farm and Ranch Program. In 1989, the Oklahoma Historical Society and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture established the Oklahoma Centennial Farm and Ranch Program to recognize those families who have continuously occupied their lands and carried out farming or ranching operations for at least 100 years. Additionally, the program is designed to help identify historic buildings, structures, sites, districts, and objects associated with Oklahoma's farming and ranching industries. Geographic Information Systems. A Geographic Information System, or GIS, is a helpful tool for managing and analyzing data to assist in communication, reporting, and understanding of geographic places and phenomena. The SHPO uses GIS to assist the Review and Compliance Program, Section 106, the National Register of Historic Places, tax credit application analysis, and the Centennial Farm and Ranch Program by mapping out where these places actually are. GIS is also an important tool for education, outreach, and community involvement that can enhance the decision-making of legislators, large landowners, government officials, and community organizations. So, how do we use all these tools to assist with our New Deal programs resources? And specifically, where you all can find the information that we have readily available. So, where to find our documents? On our website, that is the page listed there, we have thematic surveys listed with several being specific to New Deal resources. As you can see, some of these are a little bit old, and that's fine. It is what it is. Through our continuous efforts in our survey work, Section 106 work, in our all of our other programs, we do try to retake photos or identify when things have been lost, and we do try to update them in our various platforms that we have. But as you can see, some of these are pretty old, but that's what we have. So, between 1933 and 1945, Oklahoma's roads and bridges underwent a period of significant construction and improvement. Dirt roads became interstate highways, bridges and culverts spanned rivers and creeks, and Oklahoma began to mature into the thriving and interconnected state that we know today. In this survey, which was prepared by the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, identifies the various New Deal programs that built and improved Oklahoma's transportation infrastructure, as well as the individual resources themselves. And we use this all the time whenever we are doing our Section 106 reviews for ODOT or federal highways projects. It's like a sweet spot. Okay. The Department of Geography at Oklahoma State University, represented by Dr. Allison Grenier as the principal investigator and Dr. Mark A. White as the art historian, conducted a thematic survey of the New Deal era public art in Oklahoma during the 2003-2004 fiscal year. This survey was carried out under contract to the Oklahoma State Historic Preservation Office. This survey included all 77 counties in the state. 37 examples of public art were identified, documented, and photographed. If this art was located within a building, that property was also minimally surveyed using the Historic Preservation Resource Identification Form. Surveyed properties were also photographed in order to provide views of at least 3 elevations for each property. And the result of this particular survey resulted in about, I think, 6 National Register nominations for these murals specifically, mainly in post offices. The Oklahoma SHPO conducted an architectural historic resource survey of 10 state parks in cooperation with the Oklahoma Tourism and Recreation Department. All 10 parks were developed during the New Deal, 1933 to 1942. The survey was designed to assist the Oklahoma Tourism and Recreation Department in understanding which parks contained historically and architecturally significant resources, identifying resources that were eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places, and planning for the preservation of specific resources. As previously mentioned, we also have an entire page dedicated to our WPA region reports. This survey was conducted between 1985 and 1987, and it is sorted by county, sorted by region and then county. In these reports, you will find the Historic Preservation Survey inventory forms for the various WPA resources throughout the reference county. And then this is the final report. And this document constitutes the final written report of the WPA Structures Thematic Survey Phase 3 conducted by Oklahoma State University's Department of History under contract with the Oklahoma SHPO. This survey covered regions 1, 6, and 7 and was conducted between September 1 of 1986 and August 30th of 1987. This survey identified 357 WPA properties that warranted further study for possible National Register nomination, 158 properties that did not warrant further study, and 531 properties that were no longer extant or could not be located by the surveyor. Sometimes our survey efforts result in properties being listed in the National Register of Historic Places, individually or listed as a historic district. Additionally, we have a few National Register of Historic Places multiple property listings documents that have been used to individually list properties to the National Register under that context or theme. This thematic nomination deals with a portion of the physical legacy in southeastern Oklahoma of the Works Progress Administration, later named the Works Project Administration. WPA public buildings, recreational facilities, and cemetery improvements are significant because they are monuments to a program that reduced the economic and social distress of the National Depression of the 1930s in southeastern Oklahoma's 11 southeastern counties. Additionally, WPA structures provided long-lasting educational, military, recreational, and conservation benefits for the region. Finally, the building program left a legacy of architecture recognizable by type, style, scale, materials, and workmanship. And this thematic nomination deals with a portion of the physical legacy in northwestern Oklahoma of the WPA. WPA constructed public buildings, recreational facilities, and water quality improvements in Oklahoma's 10 northwestern counties are major cultural resources significant economically, socially, educationally, militarily, and architecturally. Construction of them eased economic distress within the region, salvaged the self-esteem of destitute and unskilled workers, inaugurated an educational resistance and reformation, enhanced the military preparedness of National Guard units, soon to see action in World War II, and gave expression to a distinct vernacular architectural style, recognizable by type, style, scale, materials, and workmanship. In sum, WPA constructed public buildings, recreational facilities, and water quality improvements, although somewhat ordinary in appearance, possess extraordinary local historical and architectural significance. All those words came from the nomination, So in order to qualify for a listing under this particular multiple property listing, the resources must have been constructed by the WPA between 1935 and 1943 as part of its work relief program to combat the Great Depression. As local manifestations of the significant New Deal program of the 1930s, they merit simplified architectural style, which is defined in the historic context as a WPA standardized style. Its characteristics include the absence of intricate structural designs, ornate architectural features, and elaborate constructions, minimal decorative details consisting of round arched entrances, stone or brick chimneys, ribbon windows, open eaves, exposed rafters, chimney pots and quoins, and the use of native materials. Properties exhibiting a combination of these characteristics warrant listing under Criterion C for architecture. So, of the over 1,400 properties that are currently listed in the National Register of Historic Places in Oklahoma, there are roughly 130, about between 130 and 150 properties that are listed due to their relation to the New Deal programs, with many of them listed under one of those previously mentioned multiple property listings. So, before I go into questions and comments, I'm going to show you physically where you can find these items, because sometimes they can be a little, you got to do some deep dives. So, do I have time?
Yep, you're good. I'm
Okay.
just going to snag the mic.
Do it. Yep. All right. So here is our website. Yep, I got it. Which is okhistory.org/SHPO. So State Historic Preservation Office. And this is our main page. Oh, I don't know how to go to link. Oh gosh. So I'm just gonna stand like this. So under programs, you can go to, depending on which program you're going to or what information you want to look up. More often than not, when people come to visit our website to do research, they're looking for the National Register of Historic Places. So click on that, and then the quick and easy way to actually get to our, and here's the information for how you know, the introduction to the National Register, how you go about nominating something, how you go about getting a preliminary determination of eligibility for a property. But for research purposes, more often than not, you're going to go over to, you're going to click on Old Central at OSU over here, the National Register of Historic Places, which is going to take you to another page where it is a searchable, this is our searchable database of all 1,400 properties. And you can search by architect or builder, property name, city, county, but if we just go to Lawton, I'm gonna cater to the crowd. Lawton, here are all the properties that are listed within Lawton. So you got a little bit of everything. Your Carnegie Library is listed. The high school is listed. And so you can start to go through these and really start to see what all is listed. And even if the property is no longer extant, which means that it's been lost to, you know, various powers that be, it will still be listed on here. It will still be in this database for research purposes. So that is our National Register database. For surveys, which is probably what you guys are going to be secondly interested in, we have our survey page with a link to the Oklahoma Landmarks Inventory. Please note that this is just our list of, this is our compiled database of all of the HPRID forms, or Historic Preservation Resource Identification forms, that we have collected over the years. This is not saying that a property that is in here is a landmark. It just happens to be the name that was created before my time. So don't ask me why it's called that. It wasn't me. But you can search by if it's a property, so a building, an object, a site, a cemetery, or a bridge, because we have a lot of bridges. So if you go under property, again, it will give you an option for how you're going to search. So if you guys remember that short list for Lawton that was on National Register, here's Lawton's, here's the OLI for Lawton. I'm not even halfway done with our list. So as you can see, some of these were done as part of a historic district. So Old Town North Historic District. This was a, this was one of those surveys that were done for an area. It's a residence. It'll tell you some brief information about it. This is a 1.5-story rectangular building with a medium pitch front gable roof and an overhang and eaves. Sometimes they will have photographs, sometimes they won't. It just depends on when these were done and if that information has been uploaded yet or not. Please keep in mind that the people who are uploading these and entering this into a database is OSU students. So sometimes we get them as the school year happens. Lawton Spring Welding Company. So this one has a photo. That's what it looks like. Sometimes these photos are not great, but that's all we got. Hello. So I know some people who can be really geeks about this stuff. They'll just go on deep dives and look at whatever in their town, or if they're interested, let me just go look at, I'm gonna go look at Chelsea. What's all in Chelsea? What's been looked at in Chelsea? But we use these on a regular. When people call us to ask us about information on a property, we'll come here and take a look at what all may be there at the time. And then another resource that I find beneficial is actually our interactive map. And this is that GIS stuff that we were talking about. So Marcus Young is our GIS coordinator in our office, and he's the one who helps maintain our GIS map. So this is a map of the properties, the historic properties that have been identified in our state, as well as these are national trails that have been provided by, or a National Historic Trail, which has been provided by National Park Service. So you can see how they cut through our state. The blue is our what we call determined eligible properties. So these are properties that have been officially determined eligible for listing in the National Register, but have not gone through the formal listing process. Whereas the red are our National Register listed properties. And then if you find ones that are black, that means that they are no longer extant, but their information is still available for research purposes. And the bigger the dots, the more resources there are in that defined area. So as we zoom in, we can see a bunch of little dots. Those are all individual properties. And then if there are any ones that are in boxes or linear, these are our historic districts. So this one, for example, is the Bridgeport Hill Hydro Route 66 segment historic district. This is the big nationally recognized Pony Truss Bridge. And if you click on more info, it will actually take you to the National Register list, page in our database. So you can have quick access to it, and there's going to be a photo. That's Route 66. I mean, it's not very exciting, but that's Route 66. But then if you click here for PDF, this is actually the nomination for the property. And so, and this is where you can read up about, what all is included within the district or within the property, why it's important, the specific dates of why they're important, and then when it actually gets into the summary and actually the dialogue and the narrative about what the property, what the property looks like at the time, and then why it's significant, why it's important, why we should care about it. So the nominations are, based on when they were written, will depend on how much information is available. Our older nominations from whenever the program started in the 1970s are really short and not really helpful for getting a lot of useful information out of them, besides they were determined to be important at the time. But depending on when they were done, and if they're photographs, you can see what they used to look like. Versus ones that are, recent ones, it's a lot more detailed information, a lot more specific about, we're not just, it's old, so we're good. There's some substance to it. So that's so here are, as you can see, this is Oklahoma City. Lots of historic districts, mainly residential, and then lots of individually listed buildings or determined eligible properties. So, it's the Cleveland Historic District. There's not going to be any information on it beyond when it was determined eligible, and these were all determined eligible through the 106 process. So there's not going to be a whole lot of information in terms of why it's important. It's going to be a matter of this was determined eligible based on a project that was done within the area. And then versus, ones that are in red that are listed. This is a newer nomination, so you see that the formatting looks different. So if you see a page that looks like this, that means that there's going to be a lot more information in it versus ones that are older. So I think those are the resources that you guys would be most interested in as they relate to the New Deal. And so I will now open it up for questions and comments.
All right, questions and comments for Sarah. I have one,
Okay.
or actually I have two. So one is for the National Historic Registry. Do you guys
National Register of Historic Places.
National Registry of Historic Places?
Register, it's not a registry. The federal registry is a different thing altogether. Which is why we're like, say it with me, National Register of Historic Places.
National Register of Historic Places.
Yes.
So when you get submissions, are you able to see or tell when maybe they've contracted out people to put it together or individuals put it together, and is there a success rate with that? And if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yes, so, sorry Mike, I'm going to take your lane up for a little bit. So I used to be the National Register of Historic Places program coordinator for a year and a half until I took over the tax credit desk, so I feel like I'm a little, qualified to speak to this. But if you actually do want to go through a National Register nomination, talk to Mike. So yes, for nominations that are funded or sponsored by somebody, more often than not, a consultant is used. And they're getting paid to do that work. So professional, it should be professional. More often than not, this comes into play whenever somebody is doing a tax credit project on a building that is not yet listed to the National Register, and it needs to be done concurrently because part of the tax credit program is a requirement of that it's listed to the National Register to qualify. Another way of doing it is through the Historic Preservation Fund that funds our office and the CLG programs. Through the CLG program, we fund national register nominations for properties that are significant in those communities. Those all have to be done by qualified consultants, by Secretary of the Interior's standards, which basically means that you've just done it before and had something successfully listed. But if you are, you know, grandma, grandpa that want to list their homestead, or in my case, ones that I successfully handheld through the process. This gentleman who was a descendant of the founders of a town that no longer exists, called Young's. The only thing that's left is the cemetery, and I helped him write the nomination with the little time that I had. Helped him write that nomination to get that cemetery listed so that the history of Young's is preserved for posterity. Technically anybody can write a nomination, but it's basically like a research paper on the property that includes an architectural description of the resource as it is today and any changes that have occurred over time, and a historic narrative within a particular context. So in the case of Young's, it was settlement, exploration and settlement, as well as ethnic heritage Native American, because they were tribally affiliated. So it's, it just depends on who's writing it. It depends on what it's being written for. Will depend on whether or not a consultant is used, or if just an interested citizen is writing it. But technically, anybody can write one.
Thanks so much for answering that question.
Yeah.
When you say CLG, Certified Local Government, and if like I said, you can contact your municipality and find out if your city is a certified local government. Lawton, we are currently kind of working on that process. You have to have a board. You have to have the resumes or biographies for each person on your board and how it qualifies for historical, significance. But after you become a certified local government, then you can actually apply for funds to have somebody help to write. To get something listed on the National Historic Registry.
Yeah.
Your office.
As well as your design guidelines.
National Register of Historic Places. Okay.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
The only reason I'm saying that is that there is a federal registry, and that's where all the laws go. So it's different. But yes, so there are only 12 CLGs in Oklahoma, and of that, really only, I'd say 8 or 9 are active. So we're always looking for more. Because we have money, so we have to give to someone.
They do have money for that program.
We have money for that program, but anything else, no. But yeah, anything else?
Okay, other questions? I have one other question, but anybody else? Got one over here.
Given the fact that we have more advanced technology than we had in the 80s, is there a possibility that they're redoing the surveys on the WPA stuff before the 100 years?
Not within, we have other concerns right now as they affect our office and how we are able to help our constituents. So as of right now, no. But we have on our website a project submission portal where you can sort of request projects that you all are interested in us pursuing. And so if you wanted to add that into there, your voice has a lot more weight in it as far as, concerned citizens than me going back to my office and be like, hey, we should do this, because that means that I have to do it and I don't want to do that. Only because I don't have the time to do that, right? As I said, I'm the only one of me in the state. If I'm not at my desk, projects are not getting reviewed. So Mike and I are here for those next 2 days, which means that the projects are just sitting on my desk waiting for review. But if we were able to get something like that put in through our portal, our project suggestion portal, then using those HPF funds, we could potentially put out a RFP or a request for proposal for a consultant to bid on those projects to get them done. Because a lot of these things that were funded by SHPO, that's where those monies came from. But it's a formal thing that we go through for fiscal years, and so I think it'd be worth a worthy undertaking, because like I said, it's been 40 years since we did that. But it would mean a lot more coming from you. Mike, what do you want?
Add that we have recently resurveyed most of the state parks
Yeah.
and those WPA resources. We do not have those online. If you want to reach out to me though, if you're from a certain state park or if you're interested, I can give you that information that we have. I don't know if you want to talk about why we were doing those surveys or not. I'll leave that up to you.
As soon as you can put me on the spot like that.
So the next question.
Yeah, right. So yes, we were in the process of working with our state parks, with Oklahoma Parks and Tourism, Tourism and Recreation Department, on resurveying those parks to potentially have some sort of like maintenance plan for them or whatever. But you know, current political climates shifted those efforts elsewhere.
Are there any other shifts that are occurring due to that?
So
in the Historical Society?
So the question was if there's other shifts that you can talk about within your organization due to particular.
Hi, how's it going? We're trying to stay under the radar. Stop recording. No, I'm just kidding. You know, we're taking it day by day for how, because we are state, but we're also federally funded, and we work a lot with a lot of federal partners. It's really difficult right now, like in this current, you know, we're taking it day by day for who's all there and what's all being funded, and so we're moving forward until we're told not to.
Thank you.
That is the most PC way I can say that. Yes. Yes.
Do you have a minimum threshold that you see successful historical tax credits program or historic tax credit projects with? Is it?
They can be as small as $7,000 to as big as $300 million. The average, the average though is about $1 million worth of project. But really, that's going to be dependent on the size of the building, their programming, what community you're in. There's a lot of factors that go into play with the size of a project. As far as successful projects, more often than there's lots of, I have an entirely different presentation on projects and how to do one and the pros and cons of doing a tax credit project and what's going to work and what doesn't work. And I have found that the most successful projects have a lot of pre-consultation, meeting with our office early on, meeting with their contractors early on, getting everybody, the owner, the designer, the consultant, the contractor, me meeting with everyone that's going to be involved with the project long term, so that everybody can be on the same page and understands exactly, especially if they've never done this before, or if they have one of their project team that's never done this before, getting in front of them and saying, your choices matter. I have seen choices made by a contractor that have cost an applicant millions of dollars. I have seen a project that had a potential $1 million window issue that may have broken the entire $50 million project. So making sure that everybody is aware on the project team, aware of the constraints, the parameters of the tax credit program, which is why I now say this is an ask for permission program, not an ask for forgiveness program. Because the standards, the standards for rehabilitation don't care about does it look pretty or not. That's not what the standards are there for. They're to maintain the historic integrity of the property while also bringing the building back up to modern use ability, right? So we understand for these properties to be viable for today and future use, that change has to happen. But it's how we make those changes that matters, right? So it's not an end-all be-all, but I've seen some stuff happen that take it very sideways. It's really easy to screw something up. It's a lot harder to fix it after the fact.
So, and the question for that one was, is there a certain threshold for like approval for the tax credit and whatnot? And so that's what, so just kind of filling in that question. We're gonna, for sake of time, we'll do one more question, and then we're going to head over to Ron Stevens Stadium.
Yes, Sarah, SHPO used to have workshops for national registrars, community-wide and/or organizations or private. Do you still have those? And if so, when are they offered?
Yes, so we still offer them twice a year. We now do them virtually because, COVID times made it to where we had to do everything virtual, and then we just kind of stuck that way. But we do them in November-ish and May. So our next ones are coming up in May. You can get to them through our website. And I'll show you exactly where they are. So if you go to events and go to workshops, you can sign up for our workshops. We have them on Section 106, we have them on National Register, and we have them on the tax credits. And there are various ones. But you can also find our previous workshops. They are all recorded. You can find them on our YouTube channel. And then we also have webinars and lunch and learns for, if you are interested in any other sort of topics that we may cover. This year's webinar series is on sacred spaces. And then we also have lunch and learns where we invite other people coming in and talking about various topics of varying interests. So the next one that we have, or we had it yesterday, was on the federal helium program, which, in case you didn't know, Oklahoma sits on top of one of the largest helium deposits in the U.S. It stretches from Kansas through the Panhandle into Texas. This giant pocket of helium that was used by NASA. So there you go. So those are some other sort of outreach things that we have available for anybody to consume. So anything else? I have business cards, and as does Mike. So if I didn't get to your question or you're interested in any of our programs, we'd be more than happy to hook you up with whoever you need to talk to if it's not one of us. So,
Thank you.
and scene.